All right, there he is. Now, Dr. Steven Hassan. Congratulations, sir. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been a journey, right? Lots of things going on.
Yeah, it's been a while since we last spoke, certainly since before the election. And I just wanted to start with a broad general question in terms of what if anything you think has changed amongst the mass of people who voted for, supported Donald Trump, who obviously many of which there's overlap, support a lot of the conspiracy theories, the big lie, the insurrection. What has changed in terms of people's beliefs? Have they gotten stronger? Have they started to deteriorate? What have you seen? What can you say broadly?
Well, broadly, I was worried about violence if Trump didn't win the election. I actually wrote about it in The Cult of Trump and made connections to Jim Jones and that his followers would do whatever he told them to do. So I was very much surprised that there was so much infiltration into the police and law enforcement, so much involvement with other leaders in the Republican Party to make this happen. We were lucky. We dodged a very violent moment in our nation's history. And then, of course, the worry was, would something happen after the certification, which was great that it happened. But then, of course, Josh Hawley, etc., were trying to still reinforce the lie about the election fraud. And I cried when Biden was sworn in. I was so relieved. It was like a nightmare, like
Yeah.
1,000 pounds coming off of my shoulders, because now we've gotten a chance to rebuild our democracy and deal with some very deep structural problems that have existed over decades, as I outlined in The Cult of Trump. And I just am so glad grown-ups are now in charge in Washington with the pandemic. I've signed up as a licensed mental health counselor to get my COVID vaccination, and I will take a picture of it when I take it and proudly talk about it. And I even did a scientific presentation to endcoronavirus.org conference talking about cults that are promulgating a distrust in medicine and science and then the vaccination effort and etc. And I think that we're dealing in psyops, psychological
Yeah.
operations, psychological warfare. And I really feel like I'm uniquely positioned to share my, journey of almost 50 years, having been in a right-wing cult that wanted to take over the government. And by the way, I don't think I said this the last time we were together, but literally in 1974, Pete, as a Moonie, Moon said to us, God wants Nixon to be president. We're all going to Washington. We're going to fast on the Capitol stairs for 3 days.
Oh, wow.
And the story goes, my father had voted for Nixon. I thought he was a crook. I got in the Moonies. I'm in DC. I call him up, telling him, Dad, we're fasting for Nixon because we want him to be president. And he said, Steve, you were right. He's a crook.
Ah,
And I said, Dad, you don't understand. God wants him to be president. And he said, Steve, now I know you're brainwashed. The guy's a crook. So,
wow.
and then on January 6th, it came to my attention that the son of Sun Myung Moon, who claims to be king and has a crown of bullets and a sanctuary church called Rod of Iron Ministry, brought a busload of people to the insurrection and was tweeting out how Antifa was doing all of the and Washington Times, the Moonies newspaper, was promulgating the big lie that the violence was the left wing instead of the Trump supporters.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and
I figured you'd think that, but it really was just a historical moment, and I thought to myself, if my family didn't deprogram me, and if I was still in, I could have been there
right,
doing
yeah,
that.
yeah. Uh,
Yikes!
you've got these two big lies. You've got the big lie about the election, and then a lot of the concerns over the vaccine, the creation, the origins, even now of the virus. There's a lot of theories about that, and I wonder if how you think we need to handle these people, how we need to talk to them, what, if any, policies, programs that we can set up to try to help them change, see the truth, rewire them, because your practices work on a one-to-one basis and you see patients, but there's millions and millions of Americans and folks in other countries as well that believe in things that didn't happen and don't believe in things that are happening right before our eyes. Is there any kind of broad general idea, policy, programs that could be initiated by government or by nonprofits that you know about that you think work?
Nothing that I'm aware of now. I, of course, have lots of ideas, but it's going to take a task force and a really big effort, a coordinated effort with experts. But it needs to be done. I mean, this is not a quick fix, but we can do, we have to think about the next 3 month, the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 4 year, 10 year, because, and it needs to be global, because essentially mind control is in the 21st century, and it's coming through our platforms. It's coming through our smartphones 24/7. And we have to start educating the young people as soon as possible. We need to find volunteers who are activists who want to help their family members and friends. We need to train mental health professionals for how to help this population, because they're not trained as a universal. We need to educate the media about how communication works, and we don't want to mistakenly amplify the wrong messages that are going to amplify polarization instead of building bridges and explaining things in ways that are not going to be incendiary. I'm very excited to be on your show and to be finally asked to be interviewed for the Cult of Trump, because it was pretty much a hot potato while
Yeah.
Trump was in office. But now that this has happened, people are all of a sudden realizing, yeah, he really said it. Everything he said is actually true. And there are structural problems, like extremists who are in our police and in our military and in our government, that swear for the Constitution, but they really don't
No,
honor that code.
that would seem. How did you see January 6th and all of the stories that have come out about the people that were there? Again, you can't generalize. There's so many different types of people and so many paths, seemingly infinite paths that brought them there. And we can look at where the funding for the event came from and the types of rhetoric and who is using it. But nonetheless, this was not something that happened overnight. These people found this movement. They found this cult. They found their way in through Facebook, through friends, whatever it is. And what was your reaction, or what has been your reaction in reading the stories about some of these people, Stephen? Maybe pick one or two, or any of the type of people that you saw show up there, the types of things they did, they said, that to a lot of us it's easy to dismiss and say, well, this person is a complete idiot. They went in with their face uncovered. They said, hi, my name is, some of them had the names of their companies on their jackets and so on. They really thought that what they were doing was not against the law. But I think you see it differently in terms of they're not idiots. That's too easy to dismiss them. What did you see when these, as you hear about who these people are and what brought them there?
So I would say, as a generalization, most people verbalize things like you just did, that people found QAnon or found Trump, but I look at it the other way, that Trump had a pyramid structured media empire, social media network with Putin's agents and agents of the Christian right and the neo-Nazis and the gun lobby and the pro-life movement, etc., that were using gathered data from scraped from Cambridge Analytica and from other ways to micro target and micro manipulate people into incremental indoctrination. Not everybody who believes that Biden isn't the duly elected president thinks that QAnon is okay. Most don't. I did predict, I think it was in October, that if Biden won by a landslide, that QAnon would go down. A lot of people would exit. And what happened when Biden was sworn in is a lot of people realized, because that was the line in the sand,
Yeah.
martial law wasn't going to be declared 5 minutes before with the cell phone emergency alert system.
Right.
And so a lot of people are very confused, disoriented, ashamed. And that's why I was really calling out, reach out to your family member or friend. Don't say I told you so. Just say I miss you. How are you? I care about you. Let's hang out when all this is over. Fine, reconnect emotionally. Play old music that you know the person liked before the cult involvement, etc. But unfortunately, people are vulnerable now because of the pandemic, the economy, and these cults are just scooping up as many people as they can who were disillusioned, a few weeks ago with the election. And so it really is a battle for the minds, if you will. And of course, folks like me who was there, I have a big heart for people who were indoctrinated into these right-wing fascist ideas. And I think the fact that so many of them thought that the president was behind this insurrection and coup, and saw the police saying, come on in, come on in. Of course, they weren't going to mask themselves and such because they thought they were, that they were patriots, right? But I can just say that, if something is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. I think the media has been doing a disservice by calling it a kooky conspiracy theory instead of more correctly, in my opinion, calling it an authoritarian cult. That has many different tentacles and many different front organizations. But I'd say the world is facing a crisis of authoritarians versus people who are democratic leaning and human rights oriented. It's not right and left. It's really authoritarianism versus human rights. And I would argue that there are many cults that are being described as Christian evangelicals in Trump space, but they're actually, in my opinion, authoritarian cults where the leader is claiming to get revelations from God and can cast out demons and everything. And Orthodox Christians don't believe these things. They don't believe that Christians should take over governments. And, they believe Jesus's words about feeding the poor and visiting the sick and taking care of the widow. So we really need to amplify the voices, I think, of different constituencies like religious leaders to say that's not Christianity.
Right.
That's not Judaism. That's, Judaism loves life, or that Christianity wants life and is not anti-science.
Yeah, everybody can have these different interpretations of religion. It's hard to convince anybody whose is necessarily the true form of it, and so it's always a continuing struggle. But I would think, that you. I mean, you had said, and you said it again there, that maybe sometimes when it doesn't work out, when the predictions don't come true, people start to fall away. What have you seen so far?
Oh, I think a lot of people are disillusioned, and I think a large amount of what's happening is the information bubble. If people are not willing to listen to other facts and presentations, if they have accept the indoctrination of fake news, anything that's negative against us is fake, and the media is the enemy of the people. If you have that mindset, instead of saying, look, let me read it for myself, let me fact check it myself, let me listen to both sides and come up with my own opinion, because that's really thinking and using your own brain. I think that there's reason for a lot of hope. I do believe that it's necessary to hold people accountable. I do think that it was very important to deplatform Trump and QAnon and other extremists. And people say, but free speech, free speech. And I'm like, the law is very clear. You're not free to call fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire. If there is a fire, you have a duty to warn, to help preserve life. But doing things to cause violence is not what a society can say is, oh yeah, do as much as you want.
I agree with you that it's a good thing, but are you concerned that it somehow creates a larger, more intense cult, in that, Twitter has silenced Trump and others, that it makes them a martyr? I mean, how much of a concern do you have about that possible
I have a
effect?
lot of concern, and I want to just talk about a concept called complex systems theory. It's been around since the 80s. It's something I've learned, but it instead of thinking cause effect in a linear way, it's like move, counter move, move, counter move, and it was naturally predicted that people would go to other platforms. But the question is, would they continue to influence vast numbers of Americans who were following the office of the president and feeling like it was their duty to follow the president? So I think that my last information was that Parler was kicked off of Amazon and is on a server in Russia right now, along with some, other extremist groups. So for people who are true patriots, they will want to understand the deep connection with Putin and the intelligence services and the Trump attempted takeover.
What do you think, if anything, the media gets wrong? You mentioned one thing earlier about not calling it a kooky conspiracy theory, but calling it a authoritarian cult, which I like. But, for example, everybody's now being introduced to the great work, the great mind of Marjorie Taylor Thomas, is that her name?
Green, yeah.
Green, whatever her name is. I get that name confused with the actor from Home Improvement. My bad. Sorry to him. But what...
Really?
I mean, what if anything do you think is wrong with the coverage of her current beliefs, her past beliefs, her behavior? Is that an example of, some people are saying the media is paying too much attention to her, but I really don't know, and I wonder what you think the media is doing wrong.
So I think that people are so numb and overwhelmed by the disinformation that's been coming at us, especially for the last 4 years. And the distrust is so high in what do I believe, etc.
Yeah.
And I think that instead of preaching to the people who already think that she's not a good person and shouldn't be in our Congress, we should be messaging broader. And that doesn't mean giving equal time to someone who's spewing lies. Like, I thought from the beginning that was a terrible idea, to do equivalences, to say, well, 97% of global climate scientists say there is man-made climate crisis, and there are a few experts, the same ones that were paid by the tobacco industry, saying that tobacco didn't cause cancer, saying there's no such thing as climate change, because they have fossil fuels, whether it's their country, like Russia, like Texas and other things. And 97% in the scientific community is pretty certain.
Yeah.
Gives a little
Yeah,
wiggle, but
it's
you don't give equal time to someone who's giving propaganda and disinformation. That's a big mistake.
right. Well, I agree. I think that his, the deplatforming. I think what you said is that it's just the signal doesn't get out to as many people. It just can't, and that's important. It's interesting though to see that Alex Jones was a huge part of the Stop the Steal rally. He funded it. He helped bring in one of the biggest funders, and he got a position to speak there. And you would think that a guy like that would somehow fade away, go away. He's got no platforms, but he seems to be doing okay. And so, sadly, are many of his ideas.
Yeah, so I wrote about him in The Cult of Trump, and
Yeah.
at the time that I wrote it, it was documented he had taken 1,000 disinformation stories from Russia, spun it out, Breitbart picked it up, Fox picked it up, and then the major outlets picked it up. So it kept amplifying. Big mistake. I've been listening to Alex Jones talk about Civil War and telling people to buy their assault rifles and buy their supplements for when the Civil War is coming. And he talked about eating his neighbor if he was hungry to feed his family,
Yeah.
right? This is the guy who brainwashed his kids to hate their mother, in a custody dispute, right? So we need to, what was great was when the victims of Sandy Hook sued him for the lies.
Yep.
And he said on deposition, I must have been have a psychosis when I was saying that. I mean, that is what we need to do, more lawsuits where we hold people accountable for these horrendous lies, so that people can know that they are dangerous people.
I would imagine, and you're probably pretty busy these days, but if people know someone that want to get them help, and go to freedomofmind.com and follow Steven on Twitter, buy all of his books. They're so informative and help you understand what you or your friends, loved ones are dealing with, and with a lot of compassion because of his own experience and his own life being a member of a cult. Very few people have your kind of credibility and your education and the passion with which to apply it. So happy to have you doing this work, and just sad
Thank
that
you.
it's so important. It's just
Yeah,
so
thank you
important.
so much.
Yeah.
And really, we need to scale how to help people, empower people. And I
Well, I
just
think you
report.
should just can't you just get someone like you get a grant to see people as well as train other therapists to understand?
I don't know how to write a grant, but I
Oh,
bet
well.
someone may be listening to this who knows how to do that.
Well, someone
Um,
wants to help.
and I do want to say that
Yeah.
while I would love to help the administration, I think I would probably be more effective not as a government, connected spokesperson. But I'm not shutting any doors, because the goal is to help as many people as
Right.
possible, as
Right.
much as possible.
Thank you very much, sir. So appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you for your good work, and be well.